And I am Jessica Shepard, and I am a school psychologist for ESU 9, and I work in several different schools within this region. So we are here to talk with you
a little bit about other one in because I can
a little bit about self-care today. And of course, we're going to try to laugh as much as we can because it's self-care and it's April. So for anybody watching this recording later, know that it is late April, and this time of year in any kind of a school district comes with its own little bits of chaos. So we have to chuckle a little bit. So my objectives are listed here, and they would have been emailed to you as well if you registered ahead for the training. But I felt like I really want to summarize those objectives and kind of get to the meat of what I want you to come away with. So at the end of this training, I'm really looking to see that you have more of an awareness for the fact that you need self-care, and then that you also come away with an actionable first step. I think often we attend these kind of trainings and we think, oh, it's, it invigorates us a little bit and we get some really great ideas. But I'm really looking to see that you are able to leave and truly have something to help you moving forward. We obviously are here for only an hour. And so I am going to give you information that I feel like is relevant. And then I will also give you resources so that you have places to go if there's pieces of this that you find interesting. The resources that relate to various pieces of self-care or things that we talk about. So I also direct you to some of those so that you have some things to go to for future use. But first, as we get started, to kind of wrap our heads around self-care a little bit, I just have kind of an activity for you. And what this is I'm going to have you visualize. So you're welcome to do whatever works best for you, but I'm going to read a poem that kind of introduces this topic of self-help to all of us. So this poem is called Autobiography in 5 Chapters, and it's written by Portia Nelson. Chapter 1. I walk down the street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in. I am lost. I am hopeless. It isn't my fault. It takes forever to find a way out. Chapter 2. I walk down the same street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I pretend I don't see it. I fall in again. I can't believe I'm in the same place, but it isn't my fault. It still takes a long time to get out. Chapter 3. I walk down the same street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I see it is there. I still fall in. It's a habit. My eyes are open. I know where I am. It is my fault. I get out immediately. Chapter 4. I walk down the same street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I walk around it. Chapter 5. I walk down another street. So again, that was Autobiography in 5 Chapters by Portia Nelson. I really appreciate the visualization this gives for us, that it is so important that we understand that while there's things that we can't control, when it comes to self-care, like when it comes to our institutions, when it comes to the places we work, the things that come to us each day, that we will have difficulties that we don't have control over. However, my goal is that you realize after today that you have an awareness that you do have resilience and you don't have to keep getting stuck in the hole. All right, so first, I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but I do want you to think a little bit about what are some of your daily or chronic stressors that you're faced with. So I'm just going to give you about 45 seconds to brainstorm some of these. Write them down on a scrap of paper that you have next to you. Just think of them in your head, whatever works best for you. I will put up here on this screen a list of some options that some people struggle really with brainstorming in the moment what their life stresses are. So here are some options for you to choose from. So I'm going to be quiet and give you about 45 seconds to look through these and think about which ones apply to you. So I know that's not really a positive thought for us to think about what stressors we have in our lives, but I think it's important to be able to pinpoint them because sometimes we can feel a little bit powerless, not really knowing where stress is coming from. So if you did brainstorm this list, kind of keep it off to the side because we may be referencing it, or it may be a good starting point when you start to think about what your self-care plan could be. So one of the things I want to address when it comes to self-care is that you need to know that self-care is not selfish. I love this picture, this icon, because it's so important and it's very true that self-care is not something that we wouldn't even let our cell phones get to low battery points. So we need to make sure that we ourselves also do not become drained. The other thing is that many of us work in school systems, we're educators or paraprofessionals, or really regardless of where we work around youth. And I'm guessing that we have some ethical guidelines that probably say we're expected to seek help if we feel like our own mental state is beginning to affect our work, which is then tells us that self-care is essential. You're also around youth a lot, so you are essentially modeling for them what self-care could possibly look like, hopefully what it could look like in a positive way. The other thing is that self-care is not something that happens at the expense of others. So it's not something that we should feel guilty about or that we should feel like is something that we're doing selfishly. It's very vital. And we're going to talk about how it's easy to integrate those things into daily life activities. So here is the plan for the day. We are going to talk about the why, the what, the how, the plan, and then help that you could seek if you feel like you need it. So the why. Why does self-care matter? It matters because you matter. Stress is unhealthy, both physically and mentally. Tasks can become more difficult to perform. We can have difficulty paying attention, and we're just not giving our full selves. You might wonder why I have thermometers listed or shown on the page here. It can affect your mood. And I often talk about thermometers when I talk with youth, when I talk to teachers, and it's something that we all should understand is that we really all come with different thresholds of emotional control. And our goal is that obviously we would come with a very low thermometer so that I can take a lot of adversity in my day, a lot of times when I have to demonstrate flexibility, when things don't really go my way, but I can handle that because I have a lot of room for that to grow. We don't want to come to school with our thermometer all the way to the top because then it won't take very many things that happen to us for us to just completely explode. And we'll talk a little more about that as well. But then when we blow up, then we let our body take control and our animal brain take control. And then we make terrible choices or we say the wrong thing. And so we always want to be sure that we have a wide threshold of emotional control and regulation. So one of the things I want to talk about, because I'm passionate about brain research as well and how our body works and the things that we have control over and maybe the things we don't. So one of the things I want to talk about kind of comes from some trauma research, and that's the stress response system, which is the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. That's a mouthful. So what happens is essentially your body releases chemicals when it feels like it's under stress. So it feels like we need to have a fight or flight moment right here. And so this is often when I'm working with youth and we talk about the hand model of our brain. So we have all of the decision-making properties are kind of in the top part, and then our animal brain is in the bottom part. And so long as we're able to keep those things together, then we're able to make good decisions and think carefully and critically. But when something happens, then our brains kind of go into this fight or flight mode and the animal brain takes over. And so this is often triggered then by a release of chemicals. And one of them is cortisol. So it does all these great things for our body that help us react in the moment because we need to maybe flee from danger or fight that danger. So that's all very helpful to us. However, if we keep activating this system over and over again, then we get this release of cortisol and it does all of these really terrible things to our bodies over time. And so it can result in even just adverse health effects, some that we may not even be aware of. So if this is something that you're kind of interested in, I did include this piece. So you will have access to this slideshow at the end of the presentation, access to all the links that are within it. And this is one of them. If you're interested in this kind of piece, then I've just included Dr. Nadine Burke Harris's The Deepest Well. And then this is a link to a TED Talk that she does that explains a little bit about childhood trauma. But I feel like it also relates very well to stress that we incur throughout our daily lives and across the lifespan. All right, so quiz time. What are your guesses for the average teacher makes how many educational decisions every school day? I don't know if you want to throw that in the chat for me. What do you think? Awesome. 725, 5,000, 495, 1,000, 567. I love the random numbers. Those are the ones that win, right? Awesome. Okay, so 1,500, 1,500 educational decisions every school day. So the way it was worded is in an average 6-hour day in front of students, teachers make more than 4 educational decisions per minute. And that can be exhausting. And I'm not even going to limit this to teachers, because if you work with students at all, even if you are working in the kitchen, you are making a lot of decisions every single moment. And I would reference back to that thermometer. So if some of those decisions are difficult, or you get some disgruntled feedback from some of those decisions, then all of that can raise the level of our thermometer. So again, all the more reason why self-care is so incredibly important. One of the things I want to address is burnout. It is April. We are still dealing with lots of different things that can stress us out in a normal school year. And then we have lots of other things that we're dealing with as well, maybe related to COVID or different actions that we're required to take for our school districts. We want to avoid burnout. This is a part of a research study where they just tried to define a little bit about what burnout might look like. So emotional exhaustion, this is where you get done with your school day and maybe you come home and you just sit on the couch because you're done. You just feel very exhausted. There's nothing left. You feel like there's no reserve of energy. Depersonalization. So do you feel like when somebody walks into your classroom or you just meet somebody in the hallway that you see that person as, oh my gosh, they're going to give me another problem, instead of kind of seeing them for who they are and thinking about their background and what's going on in their lives. And then finally, we can have this sense of no sense of accomplishment, which means that even though you are probably making a significant difference every single day in the lives of youth, at the end of the day or at the end of the month, you feel like you've done nothing. And so you're not feeling that achievement. So this is something that we want to avoid, and self-care on a daily basis can do that. Again, to give you another resource, I wanted to direct your attention to this book, and it's From Burnout to Fired Up from Morgan Michael. And this, I also included a handout from the main idea where they kind of summarize this book so that if you're just kind of interested in hitting the high points, that you're welcome to look at that to learn a little bit more about maybe how to get yourself from being burnout to using some additional strategies. And then self-care has to be proactive, right? So we should not be dousing ourselves in different things. We want to make sure that we are proactive with this process. You can certainly engage in self-care activities that will make you feel better in the moment, but it's really important that we do daily things that help us so that we don't get to this point of being so overwhelmed that we're looking like this lady. The other piece, again, kind of hitting it a second time about how important self-care is that the next generation is watching us. And so the more that we can model appropriate self-care, the better models we can be for those youth. And we know that they often watch what we do over following what we say. So the what do people say self-care requires? So admittedly, there's lots of different definitions over what makes wellness and what makes self-care. So I'm not advocating for any one of these positions necessarily. I'm just going to give you some information about what people feel like there's a definition for here. So we can start with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So in this version, we feel like you have to have achieved these basic level of needs, safety and food and shelter. These are the core areas. And then we kind of work our way up towards some of these other areas of needs. So if we're thinking about what do we need as an individual, you can think about self-care as I need to fill in all of these different blanks and make sure that I'm achieving all of those different areas to some degree. Another one, we can talk about self-care as it relates to different areas of our lives. So we could have self-care for physical health, for our emotional health, our social health, spiritual health. We have personal space, financial, and work. So in this model, we would think we want to make sure that we are engaging in activities or crossing off all of the boxes for all of these different areas to make sure that we are truly getting a full idea of our own self-care. Another one, this one comes from Berkeley, and basically they talked about keys to well-being. So what does it take to really live a full life? And they listed lots of different things. So they've done some research to back this. If you're interested in these areas, they do have a pretty neat website at that greater good berkeley.edu/key, and they list all these different areas and give you some resources, some ways to kind of measure where you're at with these different areas, and then ways to bolster or bring up those areas if you feel like you're lacking in some of them. One of the things when I talk about what is self-care, I want to kind of highlight the difference between temporary and enduring. So our goal is enduring, but obviously there's lots of things that we're going to do that could be temporary as well that still feel very good. So temporary self-care is things like if you go out to dinner with a friend, or you go see a movie, or you go on a vacation. So these can all be things that in that moment, they make you feel wonderful. And maybe even for a while after, you'll have some effects of, hey, that was a really great experience, and you can reflect on it and feel better. But what we're really trying to get at are these more enduring pieces of self-care that really actually kind of change the way that our brains work and react, because that is sort of what helps us in the long run. Because temporary self-care or those in the moment activities aren't really enough to help us get to where we need to be to manage that self-care. So again, when we talk about flipping our lid reference, where we want to make sure that we can have that good problem solving and that it can cover this animal brain piece, what enduring does is it gives us a few more seconds. So when we actually build up or thickens parts of our prefrontal cortex, it gives us the ability to have a few more seconds so that we can respond versus reacting to people. So something happens to us and that gives us a few more seconds to actually think. We can stop, we can breathe, and we can make a decision versus kind of allowing that physical response to just take over. So the how. The Office has become one of my new favorite shows, and this always makes me laugh. So we need to identify activities that can support self-care. So what can we actually do, and what does this look like? So what this looks like, this is a meta-analysis that was done by a group of researchers, and they looked at psychological interventions to improve mental well-being. So lots of different studies, and they looked at all of these different studies that were done kind of on this mental well-being. And they tried to sort of pare them down to what were some of the key features that these research studies said, hey, these things really do help. And these were some of them. So mindfulness is one, gratitude, cognitive behavioral strategies is another, and then also grit. So I am not going to talk a lot about grit with you, partially because I think I could talk about grit for hours because I find it fascinating and it's a really neat concept and topic. But that's why I did give you this link in the slides. So Angela Duckworth does this research on grit, and she wrote the book, The Power of Passion and Perseverance. She talks a lot about grit. She talks a lot about doing research on it, and she really has some fascinating insights. So if you're interested in grit, I highly recommend that you read this book. She has, even though she's a researcher, she does a really good job of talking about kind of sharing some stories along the way. So again, the other areas that we will sort of talk about, what are some strategies, are things like mindfulness, gratitude, and these cognitive behavioral strategies. So what do these things look like? First of all, we can talk about mindfulness. And what doesn't help mindfulness is, no surprise, some cell phone use. So again, if you want to take to your chat and see if you can give a guess, if you want to separate them by commas, I'm looking for the average American touches his or her cell phone how many times a day, and then the average American looks at his or her cell phone between how many times a day. So far I've got like touches 40 times, looks at their cell phone about 30 times. Another big one, then we've got touches phone 540 times, looks at it 550 to 700 times, touches it 50, looks at it 100. Excellent guesses, guys. I appreciate that. So what we have, and this isn't listed on one of your slides, so I'll just give you the numbers verbally. So the average American touches his or her cell phone 2,600 times per day. And then the average American looks at his or her cell phone between 90 and 165 times a day when we're actually picking that cell phone up. This is something that doesn't help with our mindfulness, because obviously if we are touching that phone, we are not in the moment. We are not clued into what's going on. And if you're interested, there is some really great research and information about how we really are, in a sense, addicted to our phones. And there's lots of things in our brain that happen that sort of reward us for using that. So keep that in mind, and know that this often happens unconsciously, but it's often deterring us from some of that helpful mindfulness pieces. So mindfulness, we're not talking about a mind that is full, which is what the picture on the left sort of shows us. And what I think we are often doing, we are a group who often multitasks, and we attempt to do as much as we can in as little amount of time as we can. And so what we need to be thinking about is mindfulness is being in the moment. It is feeling what is around you, and it is not thinking or worrying, which is often what happens to us, about things that are outside of this particular moment. So it is full attention to what's around you. It's time out from things like phones or lots of noise. You are actually in the moment. You're not judging yourself either. We talk about mindfulness in that it's okay to have intrusive thoughts. When you are trying to practice mindfulness, your brain is going to go to other things in that moment. And all you have to do is stop and recognize it, and then bring yourself back to the moment. And this kind of piece is what allows us to have that response time. And it actually sort of grows our brain in order to give us that response time versus reacting in a moment. So this piece here, I am going to play a segment of it, but obviously you're welcome to watch the full video on your own time if you like. And this is called Gratitude. And what it is it's the perspective of a young child and an older gentleman talking about what gratitude looks like to them.
When I watch TV, it's just some shows that are pretend, and when you explore, you get more imagination than you already had, and when you get more imagination, it makes you want to go deeper in, so you can get more and see beautiful things. Like the path. If it's a path, it could lead you to a beach or something, and it could be beautiful.
You think this is just another day in your life? It's not just another day. It's the one day that is given to you today. It's given to you. It's a gift. It's the only gift that you have right now, and the only appropriate response is gratefulness. If you do nothing else but to cultivate that response to the great gift that this unique day is, if you learn to respond as if it were the first day in your life, and the very last day, then you will have spent this day very well. Begin by opening your eyes and be surprised that you have eyes you can open. That incredible array of colors that is constantly offered to us for pure enjoyment. Look at the sky. We so rarely look at the sky. We so rarely note how different it is from moment to moment with clouds coming and going. We just think of the weather, and even of the weather we don't think of all the many nuances of weather. We just think of good weather and bad weather. This day, right now, is unique weather. Maybe a kind that will never exactly in that form come again. The formation of clouds in the sky will never be the same that is right now. Open your eyes, look at that. Look at the faces of people whom you meet. Each one has an incredible story behind their face. A story that you could never fully fathom. Not only their own story, but the story of their ancestors. We all go back so far. And in this present moment, on this day, all the people you meet, all that life from generations and from so many places all over the world flows together and meets you here like a life-giving water if you only open your heart and drink. Open your heart to the incredible gifts that civilization gives to us. You flip a switch and there is electric light. You turn a faucet and there is warm water and cold water and drinkable water. It's a gift that millions and millions in the world will never experience. So these are just a few of an enormous number of gifts to which we can open your heart. And so I wish you that you will open your heart to all these blessings and let them flow through you. That everyone whom you will meet on this day will be blessed by you. Just by your eyes, by your smile, by your touch, just by your presence. Let the gratefulness overflow into blessing all around you. And then it will really be a good day.
Thank you.
Some great reminders for how we can really think about gratitude is something more than just even thanking those around us. It's being thankful for all of the little things that we have in our life. So how can I demonstrate gratitude? So obviously the video shows us that we can demonstrate gratitude by just being aware and conscious of all of the great gifts that we have each day that are around us. The other thing is that we can demonstrate gratitude to those people that are around us. This can be done by writing a note of thanks. I actually have a coworker who texts a group of friends, kind of an accountability group, and will text things that they're grateful for each day. And then if they haven't, then you have a friend who steps up and sends you theirs. And those are things, it can be anything. It can be someone around you. It can be something, a modern technology, something wonderful that happened that day. It sets a positive mindset for you, which changes the way that you think about your day, and your positive outlook becomes more present. You can journal, focusing on positive things. Once you find that you reflect throughout your day, you will often see that there were more positive things than maybe you realized, because especially in our profession, we are often focused on the fires. Admittedly, when things are not going well, our goal is to swoop in and fix those problems. But if we, upon reflection, are able to look at our day, there's often more positive happening than we realize. Or you can even email somebody each day and thank them for something they've done for you, whether it was recent or in the past. One thing that I want to think about when we talk about how I can go about promoting my own positive self-care, and this was something that was kind of new to me recently, was just thinking about and brainstorming what brings you joy. And that might seem a little bit silly, but what things in your environment, what things around you can you surround yourself with that make you feel good? That is it an essential oil? Is it a diffuser? Is it music? Is it complete silence? Is it a certain smell? Is it a certain activity? A joke? The air that's in the room? Are there things that bring you joy, even unconsciously, that you can just incorporate into your day whenever possible? So for me, I realized that I really like having some like classical, I like piano music playing. Really doesn't matter the type, but it really relaxes me. So it makes like report writing experiences go from being frustrating to calming, and I feel like I can focus more. Another silly small joy is that I realize that it brightens my day when I am using different colored pens. Seems really silly, right? I buy them on my own, and it's one small thing in my day that I interact with every single day that makes me smile a little bit over using a normal pen or pencil. So find those things and incorporate them when you can. Those are little pieces that can help you every single day. So the last one here is talking about the cognitive behavioral approach. And what this is just learning about the ways that our thoughts and emotions are connected to the way that we act and the way that we feel. Essentially, there's lots of different ways that we can do this, but the goal is to find that silver lining and kind of train our brain to be thinking about that. The biggest piece or the takeaway from this is that you need to know that your thoughts affect your feelings and then they affect your actions. So try to think more positively about incidents. That changes your feelings about the incident, and then it also changes how you react. And you can look more into this if this is something that interests you, but very, very helpful. So next we're going to talk about the plan. Okay, Jessica, you've told me a lot about what stressors I might have in my life, why self-care is important, maybe outlooks people have on self-care, but now what do I do, right? I'm looking for these actionable steps. And this is where I'm going to turn it over to Lisa, because she's going to go over lots of great information for you.
Thanks, Jessica. Is there a way that I can run the PowerPoint from here? Do you know?
I don't think so. So if you just want to tell me when you're ready to move slides, we can do that.
Okay, perfect. I do just want to add on a little bit. I'm also super passionate about brain research and how the brain impacts our daily functioning. Of course, as a therapist, that's kind of my jam. I want to add to when Jessica's talking about that brain model, we're talking about flipping your lid or the prefrontal cortex. So what happens in our bodies all the time is that our bodies are constantly searching for a state of homeostasis or balance, no matter what we're doing, whether it's going for a walk, like a lot of exercise or exertion, whether it's sleeping, whatever we're doing, it's always going to be searching to find that state of balance. It's actually why when someone might take an illicit drug, like cocaine or weed or whatever have you, they get that initial high that impacts them intensely and it's really enjoyable. And then they can never get it again, because once you put that substance in your body learns, oh, I get it. I understand what happens when I take this. So now I'm never going to go there again, because the body doesn't want to be super high or super low. It always wants to be at that state of balance. The reason that I share that with you is because stress will send you out of balance as well. And when we talk about that warning system in our brains, that fight or flight system, if we're feeling a lot of anxiety or feeling a lot of stress, that fight or flight system in here is going to be going off, while while your body's experiencing that. So it's going to be sending those alarms of, I don't feel good, I'm not happy, I'm upset, I'm stressed, and whatever the case may be, it's going to be searching for something to make itself feel better all of the time. So anytime that's going on, when you have high levels of stress or anxiety, and something else comes into the picture, maybe your kids are having a really hard day, or maybe in the classroom, there's a kid who's having a major behavioral concern, or maybe you didn't have a great review from your principal, or whatever the case may be, you're going to be less likely to be able to manage that stressor because you've already got all of this stuff that's sending warning signals to your brain, and you're no longer able to manage it because you're over capacity. So I know we talk a lot about like self-care is so great and we need to take care of ourselves, but I really want to understand and just kind of go back to Jessica's point that the brain chemistry really drives that. That's the function of why self-care is important to us, so that we can function in our work, in our personal lives, etc. So no surprise to any of us, recent Yale research has indicated, particularly post-pandemic, that predominant feelings teachers are experiencing are anxiety, fear, and sadness. And then my own addition into that is the exhaustion. Like Jessica said, it's April, I feel it myself. Being in the schools, I know that lots of staff members are feeling it too, that we're at that end point of the year and it feels like it's so close and it's so far away at the same time. So, what do we do about that exhaustion is the real question. What do we do about the anxiety and the fear and the sadness? I, read a lot about self-care and we hear a lot about it. And what we really want you to walk away from today is a plan, something that we can put into action, that you can walk away and actually apply to your life so that you can feel a reduction in stress or feel better in areas of your life that would help you with that. The video that Jessica shared, the gentleman on gratitude, he said to let those around you feel blessed by you. And I think that's fantastic. We as educators or working with kids all day long, all of us are pouring ourselves into kids constantly. And then we have to go home and pour ourselves into our families if you have them, into our personal lives, our spouses or loved ones. And then what about us? We're often at that bottom of that list, right? So if you want to go on to the next slide, Jessica. Okay, so self-care. What does that mean actually? When we talk about self-care, there are two types of self-care. We don't often think about it in these, just one, go ahead one, there you go. We don't actually talk about it in real chunks of information. We think about it in bubble baths and chocolate and, maybe it's a glass of wine at night or, some hot tea. Maybe it's watching Netflix. Maybe that's how you define self-care, but it's actually pretty difficult to do real true self-care where Jessica's talking about that long-term impact in your life. There's two different kinds. This is an activity that I walk through with my clients all the time. There's active self-care and there's passive self-care. So if you can click for me, Jessica. That active self-care is going to be things that are actually more difficult. But when you complete them, these are the things on your to-do list that you're procrastinating, you don't want to get done. They don't seem like that much fun, but when you complete them, you physically feel better. There's more space in your brain. You're not going over all of that constantly. I got to get that done. I got to get that done. I got to get that done. If you could click for me, Jessica, I'll list out some active self-care things for you. One of the things that I recommend to my clients all of the time is that when you are at a moment of calm, when things feel manageable and okay in your life, is to actually sit down. I have my own list at home and make lists of active self-care and passive self-care, so that when you're in those moments of overload or crisis or whatever it may be, you can pull out those lists and you already have things lined up for you. So your brain isn't on top of dealing with stress, having to think of these things. So that active self-care, like I said, are those things that don't sound like fun. Who wants to fold the laundry? Definitely not me. My dining room table is a total indication of that currently. Organizing a closet. My brain actually thrives on organization, but it doesn't, I live with three humans in my house and 2 dogs. So organization is not always something that's happening, but I've found that when I build that into when I'm feeling stressed, when I set aside time to finish a project like that, I feel better in the moment. But then every time I walk past that space in my house, whether it's a pantry or a closet or the garage, I feel better knowing that that's done and everything has its space. On here, I also listed having tough conversations and setting healthy boundaries with people, with work, with our spouses, whoever that might be. Those conversations are so difficult to have, but the outcomes are long lasting and they feel so much better. And of course, go to therapy. So if you can click again, Jessica. Passive are those things that feel good, that don't take a lot of energy. And sometimes that's what we need. Taking a hot bath, At the bottom, I have listed giving and receiving a 20-second or more hug. And it's a very specific amount of time because there are things that are released, chemicals that are released in our brains, dopamine particularly, when we hug for 20 or more seconds. So this is a great thing, like when you're at home and your kid's having a meltdown, and if they're in a space where they're willing to accept touch and love and care, if you could hug them for at least 20 seconds or more, that's when those chemicals, those feel-good chemicals, are actually going to get released in their brain that help them feel calmer, to help them feel centered and loved and cared for. And it goes the same way for you. You have the same benefits in that moment. Okay, so I always in my presentations talk a little bit, we ask our participants to always share a little bit about themselves, and I feel like it's only fair that we give a little bit of background on ourselves in that process. So I am a single mom. I have 3 kids. They are 9, 6, and 4 currently. I don't have another parent that is helpful with them, that's available for them. So it's all just me. I'm a mental health therapist, like I said, by day, in schools all day long. If you're in schools, you know that that's a dynamic, ever-changing environment. That means I'm responding to crisis, doing one-on-one therapy sessions with kids, and my job gets pretty heavy at times. I love it. I'm passionate about it, but it takes a lot of energy to do it. And then I go home and my kids are involved in a million different things. So we spend a lot of time in the evenings doing activities and all that kind of thing. I share that because at the beginning or the end of the beginning of last year, 2021, was it? I found myself really burnt out. I didn't have energy left for work. I didn't have energy for my kids. It was like slugging through activity after activity, forcing myself to get out of bed, forcing myself to show up for my kids with energy and excitement, and not often doing great at any of those things, at least in my own perception. So what I decided to do was that I needed to change, that something was not working in my life. So I decided to do an energy audit on myself. And if you don't know what an energy audit is, I'm going to walk you through that process. And hopefully this is something that you can apply going forward in your own life. So if you can click for me, Jessica. Okay, so an energy audit, this is the nice version of it. This is the complicated version of it. You sit down and you list out all of the things that in a 24-hour time span, all of the things that take your energy and your attention, starting with the moment that you wake up to the moment that you go to sleep. So my day in January of 2021 was that my alarm went off at 6. And if I'm being honest, I was not getting out of bed at that time. I'm a lifelong slacker when it comes to getting up. My dad used to get so frustrated because I would jump back in bed after I took a shower and often fall asleep. So I was very honest in my audit that my alarm does go off at 6, but I'm often not actually up until 6:45. And what I noticed was that when I was getting up at 6:45, I was already exhausted. If you've ever had one of those days where you're waking up out of bed and you're thinking, oh, I can't wait to get back into bed, that's where I was at. So then I went from 6:45 to 7:30. I'm getting all of my kids up, I'm getting them fed, I'm getting them ready. I'm also getting myself ready in that time span. And it was crazy and stressful and difficult. And we often all left the house grumpy and crabby. So then we go to school and we go to work. And then from 4 to 8 is kids. And I put that in capital letters because for anyone who has kids, they understand that post-school rush is a lot of emotions and a lot of stuff that has to get checked off the list for everyone. So that's dinner time, that's going through backpacks, that's running to activities, that's giving baths and doing the bedtime routine. I have little kids, so the bedtime routine is still very long and very specific often. So that 4 to 8 period, again, is very harried, very stressed sometimes, not always, but typically stressed. The kids are tired and we're just trying to make it to bedtime. So then that 8 to 9 period, I put evening prep there that is listed into my own self-care because it's really important for me personally to make sure that my kitchen is clean, that the coffee pot is ready to brew automatically in the morning, all of that kind of stuff. And then there's me time from 9 to 11, AKA Netflix, and then eventually sleep. So as I looked at my schedule here, what I wanted to figure out was where do I have time to put into my day stuff for me? So if you can click, Jessica, I'll give you the pie chart breakdown. So I added up all of those hours. I was getting self-care was about 3 hours a day. Work was about 8 hours a day. Sleep was 7 hours and 45 minutes, and my kids were getting about 5 hours and 15 minutes. And again, when we talk about self-care, in this sense, or when I talk about in this sense, that can be anything like getting, dressed, going to the bathroom, feeding myself, that prep time in the evenings, and then that couple of hours that I was laying in bed for my quote unquote me time. Okay, next slide. So there's the schedule. And I thought, where is it that I could find time in my day to build in time for me? So if you could click again, Jessica. I needed to figure out what I was feeling, the deficits in my day, and then my needs. So the deficits were that I was exhausted and grumpy, I wasn't feeling very enthusiastic, and that everyone else, the basic needs of that, when I boiled it all down, was that I felt like everyone else was coming before me and that there was no space left for me. I needed to build in some restorative time. I needed space to prioritize my own health. And for me personally, a healthy body means that I have more energy and better mindset about all of the things in my life, which meant for me, I hadn't had time in years to work out, and that's the thing that I really wanted to prioritize. So if you can click again, Jessica, I really focused in on that 4 to 8 period of time where it's like the dinner rush and all of that stuff going on. I thought if I could just build in 30 minutes or 45 minutes during that time where my kids maybe can be independent or do something, or dinner can be prepping or whatever it might be, that I can fit in a workout, then that would be fantastic. So how do we think that worked out for me? It didn't work out great. To be honest, my kids still needed me. Dinner still had to be made. It was such a rush. I was having to pause. I decided I was going to do at-home workouts because I can't get my kids to the gym on my own. So I was having to pause my workout constantly to deal with meltdowns or arguments or whatever it may be. So that didn't work. So instead of just giving up and deciding that I don't have space and time for myself, I decided to go back to the drawing table. So if you could click again, Jessica. So here we are mid-audit. I took that same schedule and I figured out, okay, so if that 4 to 8 period time is sacred for my kids, I can't touch that. Where else do I have space? I'm a night owl. I don't like getting up early. So I really didn't want to touch those morning hours. And my me time is the only other time where I could find space. That evening prep and the hours of Netflix was the only other times that I could find space. And I thought to myself, you could go ahead and click, Jessica. Okay, and click again. I thought to myself, how is that me time really filling me up? Am I doing anything in that time period that is helping me feel better about myself, that's making me feel better prepared for my day, that is, filling up my cup, so to speak? And I decided that I was not. It was relaxing, it was, mind numbing when I just needed to shut off things, but it wasn't doing anything for me. And I thought, the only time that I can really build in hours of my day is early in the morning when my kids are asleep. That's when I need to work out, is when I don't have my kids, which is all the time. So I decided to take that evening me time and change how I was spending it so that I could get up earlier in the mornings. And then I would save the weekends or the days that I don't work out for time that I could sleep. So I shifted things. I got up early, but that meant I had to go to bed earlier. So everything stays the same except for that evening prep and me time has to get smaller so that I can go to bed earlier so that I can get up earlier. So we shifted to a 4:30 a.m. alarm. Let's be real, I didn't actually get up until 5. And again, these things are fluid. It's not like my day functions like this every day. It's not like I'm always able to get out of bed every morning, but this is kind of the general thing. So that 5 to 6 became my workout time, which has been, or other self-care, like a gratitude journal. I do that as well on the days that I don't work out. But to be honest, guys, like it's made such a life-changing shift in my life to feel like I actually have space for myself. And I don't actually feel like I'm missing out on anything much either. The added benefit, the little arrow that you see there, is that 6:45 to 7:30 a.m. rushing time, which I wasn't focused in on. I wasn't trying to change that at this point. There was an added benefit of when I got up earlier, then I had space and time for myself to get ready before my kids were up, which meant that I could have my cup of coffee, I could get showered, I could get ready before they were fighting over who got what lasts of the cereal or whatever the case may be, so that I could mediate that a little bit better. And then we were getting out of the house easier and everyone else was happier. Okay, so if you want to click over, the new pie chart looks like this. Self-care of 3 hours and 15 minutes. Work is still 8, can't change that. My kids still need me, that's 5 hours and 15 minutes, and sleep is still 7.5 hours. So if you can go one more, Jessica. The thing that I think is really important about the idea of doing this energy audit is that so often, myself included, we get into this idea or this mindset of there's no space, there's no time for me. And if I take time from me, then I have to take time from someone else. But what I really want to illustrate is when you break it down in such a clear, concrete way so that you can see how all the pieces work together, you might be shocked. I certainly was, that all that I really took off the table was 15 minutes of sleep and put that into 15 minutes of self-care. That's the only adjustment that I made in order to, well, and I shifted the timing of the self-care, right? So that the actual self-care was different, that it was filling me up, that it felt like it was something that I really needed. But the time that I didn't take any time away from my kids, and there was no time taken away from work, I just moved the pieces around a little bit, which made a massive difference in my life and how I feel about myself and my health, et cetera, et cetera. And the added bonus of my kids recognize that I'm working out, and they are getting that modeling for them too, whatever that case may be. I also show them my gratitude journal, or my, when I'm working through a lot of stuff in there, they see that too. Okay, so click again. So that's all great. I talk about this a lot in my schools, and the predominant question that I get is, okay, cool, but how are you doing that? Because I'm not a morning person. I can't get up in the morning. I hear this all the time. So the 3 things that I did was I committed to it. I decided that this was non-negotiable. That workout time was sacred. It was something I had to do. I decided that there was absolutely no way I was doing it after work, which so often before was my out for staying in bed. Was like, oh, I'll just do it later. I've decided like, nope, that's not happening. It can't happen. So I made this rule that I never make any decisions in bed. If I'm not going to work out in the morning, I have to decide that before I got in bed the night before, which I never do, because I always think I'm going to work out in the morning the night before, right? That's our plan. So no decisions are allowed to be made in bed. They have to be made out of bed. Okay, so then I also set myself up for success. I know this seems like such a silly thing, but my water bottle is filled up. That's part of that evening prep. My workout clothes are set up on my dresser, so they're ready to go. I don't have to go through a lot of work to go through things. And my alarm clock is across the room, so I'm forced to get out of bed in order to turn it off. Okay. The third thing that I did is accountability buddies. So I wear an Apple Watch. I have friends that I've added to the, there's like a activity ring things that's on there. So I have friends that are added onto that. So they get notifications on their watch when I have completed a workout, when I've closed my rings. And that creates accountability for me, because I know that somebody else is seeing that. We don't even really talk about it that much. I just know that it's being shared. You can do this. Like I have a friend who is currently trying to lose some weight. So they will text me like their weigh-in every day that they do on their own. That just helps them stay accountable. Maybe your thing is that you want to read more. You want to educate yourself on something more. So maybe you start a book club with a few friends, so that you guys have to have these conversations. You set a number of pages that you want to pass, or you want to read, so that you can discuss them later. That can look like a lot of things, but setting up that accountability person to you, so that you're forced to talk about it, you're forced to think about it, and you have a deadline, makes a world of a difference. So that's the plan, guys. I hope that was helpful for you, and that, if you have any questions, just feel free to ask me. But I really encourage you to go through and do an energy audit of your own to see if there's spaces that you can find for you. So important. And I'll turn it back over to Jessica.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I appreciate that. And it's nice to hear what that actually looks like, because admittedly, if you told me that I need to do like an inventory of my energy, I probably would have gone a different direction. So it's nice to have that perfect example of what that looks like. So when it comes to a formal plan, there are so many different things that you can do. Lisa just gave us a great example of one place to start. You can come at this so many different ways. There are so many different types of plans and examples and spreadsheets that are out there. There's different ways you can look at it. There is really no right or wrong way to do this. Do what works best for you, and use whatever resources that you need. So I've given you some resources here and some examples of what that could look like. So here's one option. This is a book that kind of can walk you through an action plan if you're interested in that. There's lots of free options as well. But what I want you to think about, and just take a second to think about, is what is one thing that you are going to try. Maybe that's, I'm going to do an energy audit. I'm going to see where my time goes. Maybe it's I'm going to purchase one of these books and read them. I'm going to pick a certain time in my day when I'm going to be more mindful. Maybe I have a mindful meal where I focus on what's happening, what I'm eating, what's around me. Pick one thing that you want to do. So then the help, I want to just really briefly go through this piece. Obviously, it might be a situation where you're feeling a little more overwhelmed and you're beyond that point of like, I want to start a self-care routine, but maybe I need a little more help in the meantime. So what I say to folks is, where do I start? You start where you're comfortable. If you're comfortable starting a self-help or self-care routine for yourself, do that. If you're ready to read a book, do that. If you feel like you need to see your physician to have conversations about the fact that you're not feeling well, please do that. If you want to see a therapist or a licensed mental health practitioner, someone, please reach out and talk to that person. If it's a church leader, whatever, start wherever you're comfortable, but seek out some help if you do feel like you need it. I can understand that the mental health profession can be a little bit confusing with who are mental health professionals. So I just gave you a link to this website that lists all of these different things about who does what in the mental health field. If you're somebody who feels like you need to see somebody, but you're not sure where to start. Because you're an educator, you have apps and resources at your fingertips that are free to you. Amwell is an awesome app. You can connect to not only therapy, but also just medical doctors. So you can use this as a telehealth support. My EHA has lots of resources, and then Headspace is free to you as well. So it is so important that we remember that we have to be the best possible in this situation. We're educators, we're working with youth, and they are seeing us at all times. So I know that we came right up to our time, but does anybody have any questions that they'd like to pose to Lisa or myself? Yeah, and Debbie shared that many of the ESUs have staff willing to help with many of these self-care ideas. Absolutely. Excellent. Yeah, there's definitely a lot out there, and even, even knowing somebody who has gone through sort of their own journey through this could be a resource for you if they're willing to share what worked for them. I know Liesel's example was super beneficial for me, kind of knowing what that process looked like. All right, so seeing no other questions, again, here's our contact information. If you have questions, please feel free to reach out to us. We would be happy to help. And then there's also a poll that's listed, but I will go ahead and turn it back over to Amber.
Thank you both so much. That was really wonderful information. And yes, Lisa, thank you for sharing your example. That was very helpful and something that I am going to work on. So thank you all for attending. If you could take a quick moment to complete the poll, we would greatly appreciate it. And again, we will have the recording and the copy of the slides and the resources on our webpage, hopefully within the next week, so that they will be available for everyone to view. So have a wonderful rest of your evening. Thank you all.
Thank you.